So while I was out in Los Angeles, I was able to attend the presentation where Hidetaka Miyazaki talked about his newest creation, Dark Souls 3.
Should you be excited? Is it too soon? What can we expect from this new entry in the series? Find out all of this and more in today's video.
Hello everyone, Rurikon here with Globku to bring you all the juicy details on the recently announced Dark Souls 3.
Hold on to your souls and praise the sun. These are the top 5 things that were revealed about Dark Souls 3.
So before we get started, I should mention that Miyazaki-san is an enigmatic man by nature, which is a quality that makes it hard for us to get detailed information out of him, particularly because he also spoke Japanese during the presentation, which meant there was also the extra step of translating the information that was being conveyed.
So what you're saying is that you can't speak Japanese? Kono yaro, baka yaro.
Not so much.
Good to know. Now, how about you give us some useful information and stop making excuses for not paying attention during the presentation? Rurikon, were you able to get any details on the lore of Dark Souls 3?
So while they didn't get into too much detail about the lore of Dark Souls 3, they did mention this constant theme of an apocalyptic world and the resurrection of the Lords of Cinder. Now, the Lords of Cinder are the heroes who kindled the first flame in order to extend the Age of Fire. So someone like Gwyn, for instance, would be a Lord of Cinder.
And also the players from Dark Souls 1 who, at the end of that game, chose to rekindle the fire. Now, without going too deep into spoilers, there are 2 choices at the end of that game, and one of them might just make you a Lord of Cinder.
And the other theme that they mentioned for the lore of Dark Souls 3 is that the player character is going to embody a dark hero killing the Lords of Cinder. So essentially you're going to be fighting for the dark, whereas in the previous Dark Souls you could choose to either fight for fire or dark.
One of the most iconic things about the Souls games are the boss fights. Ruri, did they show any bosses during the demo?
Yes, they did show us a boss fight during the gameplay portion of the presentation, and that boss was the Dancer of the Frigid Valley, and this was a character that looked like an armored bride with an ethereal veil. Now, he or she, I'm not exactly sure the sex of this boss, was a very slim character, and it reminded me a little bit of Artorias. And you know the way that Artorias curved himself up in weird ways, almost like an anime? This boss did kind of the same thing, except to a much more exaggerated level. Her body constantly twists and turns, and she has a very erratic move pattern, so to speak.
Alright, and did you notice any different phases, different movesets for the boss during the fight?
Yes, he had at least, I think we went through 2 phases during that particular boss fight. And in one of the phases, he was just using 2 scimitars, and one of the scimitars was ethereal. And as the fight progressed on, he became a little bit more aggressive, and one of the scimitars became flaming, which is currently one of the art images that is being shown as promo material for Dark Souls 3.
That all sounds extremely interesting. I can't wait to fight this guy? Well, we'll find out, I guess. A major complaint we had in Dark Souls 2 was the level design. They moved away from the shortcut architecture from the first Souls game and moved towards a more linear design with tons of bonfires along the way and with a central hub and lots of teleportation between bonfires. Did they say anything about level design for Dark Souls 3?
Taking into consideration that Dark Souls 3 is actually going to be directed by Miyazaki-san once again, this means that you can expect the level design to be much more in line with what we've seen in Dark Souls and Bloodborne, which means all of the shortcuts and a lot less bonfires, at least from what we could see during the gameplay portion of our demo.
Awesome, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's happy about this decision.
And besides that, something that was mentioned is also that anything that you can see on screen, you can explore. Now, this has been a theme for a lot of Dark Souls games, but in this specific case, Miyazaki said that you can explore both inside and outside. So any building that you see off into the distance when you are playing the game, know that you can also at some point enter inside the building itself.
And did you see a lot of buildings? Because that sounds nuts.
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of buildings in the presentation, and you could see way off into the distance at least 2 or 3 bridges, and there's just huge levels.
Well, let's hope they pull it off. That is fucking crazy. I'm just thinking about Bloodborne and how many buildings you could see off into the distance. Like, was it that level of buildings? So many stacked up on top of each other? And now you can enter all of them? No, From Software, you guys be nuts.
Yeah, the gameplay demo that we saw, the level was very much in line with what you've seen in Bloodborne, so you can expect a lot of exploration to be taking place. And on top of that, we've also witnessed something that was very interesting, which was there was a portion of the gameplay where the paths kind of branched out, and you can choose to take a route where there were a bunch of hollows clumped up together, which seemed like it was going to be pretty hard to fight through all of those hollows since there were just like a bunch of them there. So instead of that, Miyazaki said, let's take the upper road, and he went into a section where there was a dragon, and that dragon just starts breathing fire. So obviously you then go and you say, oh, this is probably not the area that we want to go to. But the problem was now the fact that that dragon was breathing fire on the top road, he was also breathing fire on the bottom road, thus making it harder for you to progress even if you choose to go back through the other path. But the interesting portion was also that the dragon ended up burning away all of the hollows. So you can either choose to go down and take care of the hollows in regular combat, or instead you can go upstairs and then you have to deal with the fire breath from the dragon and like time your passage.
So kind of like the Hellkite trick from the first Dark Souls. He burns all the minions in the bridge, but this time you have the choice of taking those minions without facing the dragon, or having the dragon take care of them, but then you have to deal with the fire. Sounds like an awesome design to me. Now, I've seen some of the announcements regarding combat, and I must say I'm extremely excited about the changes they have. One of the features that most excites me is the fact that now each weapon has different stances, and each stance has different movesets. Was this showcased at the demo?
They showed a little bit of the stances during our gameplay demo. They showed something for the straight sword, something for the scimitars, and something for the great sword. And each of these swords has specific special attacks that complement their playstyle. The straight sword's special attack is a lunge that allows you to close the gap between your enemies, and it also allows you to break their guard in case they happen to be blocking. The scimitar's special attack is a spinning AoE that allows you to take on a lot of enemies at once, and the great sword's special attack allows you to lift targets, which is really cool. I mean, we've seen this kind of like great sword action in previous Souls titles, but trust me, this one looked really cool.
Another thing I'm curious about is the movement. Now, Bloodborne was a big step towards a faster game, a faster Souls title, while the previous games you could build tanky with huge armor and be kinda slow and sluggish. Did Bloodborne bleed at all this fast-paced combat into Dark Souls 3?
From what I could tell from the presentation, yes, that is one of the things that they want to have in the game, which is improved character control. So they want you to be able to move a little bit faster, and the character in our demo, despite the fact that he was wearing heavy armor, he was still moving pretty fast.
Now, when you say a little bit faster, do you mean faster than Dark Souls games, or even faster than Bloodborne?
Faster than Dark Souls 1, but slower than Bloodborne. I mean, they want you to be a little bit faster than you were in the previous titles, because it allows you for a more offensive playstyle, and it plays really well with the special attacks that you have available to you, but they don't want you to go all out, just like light armor all the way. And I do believe that as the game progresses, you're going to be able to wear heavier armor, and thus this will slow you down. That is still going to be a mechanic in Dark Souls 3, but it is not going to be as much of a hindrance as it's been in previous titles, I feel, because they do want you moving fast, and that is going to be one of the themes around Dark Souls 3.
So even a bulky, big armor type of guy with a huge shield will be faster than previously, but still not as fast as a light armor character that you might build in the future.
Exactly.
So we can build an extremely fast character, dual-wielding weapons. And speaking of which, did they show anything new for dual-wielding?
So the interesting thing about the dual-wielding mechanic in the demo that we saw was the fact that the guy playing the game picked up an item midway through the presentation, and that item actually consisted of 2 scimitars, but it only used the 1 item slot. So you equip that, and you automatically have 2 scimitars equipped. Now, they weren't instantly in dual-wield mode because he had a shield equipped as well. So he would show one scimitar in his right hand, one scimitar was sheatheded in his belt, and he would still have the shield, but you could then switch like as you're two-handing any weapon, and you're essentially in dual-wield mode.
So specific items can be used as dual-wield weapons or can be used in a single hand with a shield or whatever. Is this how dual wielding works now? Is this the only way you can dual wield a weapon?
No, on top of this, you can also do the typical Dark Souls dual wield mechanics where you can dual wield any weapon that you want with any other weapon that you want. But these items, I feel, put in an interesting mechanic because that way From Software can basically team up multiple item combos like, let's say, a dagger and a sword, or a sword and an axe or something, and have these very specific weapons that will have their own mechanics for combat.
This gets rid of one of the criticisms that Bloodborne had, which was the lack of customization. I mean, just on dual wielding, you seem to have so many options there.
Oh yeah, they already said that they have hundreds of new weapons.
What about ranged? Anything about ranged weapons?
So during our gameplay presentation, at one point he did pull out a short bow, and Miyazaki-san mentioned that he wants the short bow to be a faster weapon so that more players actually use the short bows in, you know, a little bit closer engagements and not just when they're firing from afar. However, the long bows will still take longer to shoot, but they will also deal more damage. So for fast fire, low damage, and closer combat, you can pull out a short bow, but if you want to take the more ranged approach, you can pull out a long bow and still deal a considerable amount of damage.
Alright, seems like we have tons of options for customizing our character. I'm really happy to hear that customization is back. Now, one of the big selling points of the Souls franchise is how hard these games are. Was difficulty mentioned at all during this demo?
So this is one of the points where I am wondering if there was some kind of a mistake in translation or not, but I can assure you that what the translator said was they are aiming for a higher level of difficulty.
That's quite surprising, considering that Bloodborne was probably the easiest one in the series.
Yeah, I was surprised when he said that difficulty level is higher, because most of the presentations that I've been to for Dark Souls games, they've always said they want to maintain a certain level of difficulty in order to give the players a great sense of achievement, but they've never said we want it to be harder. And on top of that, they had a specific slide that they showed where it said, the enemy placement is designed to kill you. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's what the previous games did as well, unless you're going out of your way to make it even worse now.
Well, you watched the gameplay demo. Did you feel that the game was any harder than previous Souls titles?
Well, something that they showed was the typical ambush mechanic where they distract you with something as you enter a room, and as you're looking at that thing, someone comes up from behind and attacks you. So that's the first thing that comes to mind when talking about this enemy placement designed to kill you. But on top of that, there were additional things, like there was this mob of hollows on top of a roof, and one of them exploded with this black ooze and just became a much more formidable foe than any of the other hollows before him. And that was a specific mechanic that I thought was going to be very, very challenging, and we don't know exactly what triggered that particular transformation. Beyond this, there were also these night enemies that were a lot tougher than any of the other enemies in the level. They moved a lot faster, they hit a lot harder, and there was an occasion where he tried fighting even two of them, and you could see that the person playing the game was really struggling. However, staying true to the nature of Souls titles of being challenging but fair, you do have a higher level of difficulty, but you also have the tools to deal with it. So one of these tools is going to be an improved character control, which is something we mentioned earlier because the character is going to move faster. And on top of that, from what I could tell during the presentation, it doesn't seem like your character is going to be walking on top of glue whenever he locks onto an enemy.
Did they address anything about the online and how crappy the soul memory was?
So during our presentation, we had a bit of a Q&A section, and one of the people in the audience specifically asked about soul memory, and Miyazaki wasn't even aware of what soul memory was. So
it's like he didn't even play Dark Souls 2. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, so it seems at this point the matchmaking is going to be around exclusively soul level, and thank God for that.
Yeah.
They mentioned a couple of more online mechanics, which were the fountains, offering players to death, and the theme of sacrifice, but they didn't go into specifics of what these exactly meant.
Well, those were some very exciting details you had to share with us, Rurikhan. Thank you very much. But now it's time for you guys to hit up that comment section. What do you guys think about Dark Souls 3 and all that was shared today? Leave us your thoughts and click the like button if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to TGN if you haven't already, and see you guys next time.